Before I get into this, I just want to clarify where this advice is coming from. Over the course of a zillion Feedback Fridays and many games played across all kinds of skill levels, but primarily and most commonly beginner developers, I've come to notice a lot of things that make the first games made by new developers stand out as the first games made by new developers. I get a lot of questions from new developers about all kinds of things like what tools and languages they should be using and how to achieve their technical goals, but rarely do I find they're asking the kind of questions that would address a lot of what makes them run into the common early mistakes. That's not their fault, they don't know what they don't know, so I'm starting a series of beginner mistakes for you to hopefully avoid, or of course ignore. Because when I say mistakes, obviously game design is an art. There are no real mistakes and there are exceptions to every rule. So just because I say that typically something should be like X, Y, or Z, doesn't mean it always should. I'm talking with respect to the most obvious, broad goals of game development in the most typical of circumstances, from my lens, with my experiences. So please keep that in mind. Anyway, mistake number 1 is something my stream viewers get to hear me rant about a lot, and that is inconsistent visuals. Sometimes this is hard to avoid. You're working with an asset pack, you don't have much time, you're slapping things together, it's programmer art, whatever. But what I'm not talking about here is having bad graphics or about not being able to draw or anything like that. I'm talking about inconsistent graphics, where the art doesn't quite match. Things look bad even though individually each asset alone might look quite good. In pixel art games, this might mean having art where some graphics are a different resolution to the rest of the art. Maybe you scale a lower resolution enemy up or a high resolution sprite down. You can't resize pixel art on the fly like this without ruining the consistency of your visuals. Obviously there's exceptions, and sometimes when you're committed you might find yourself with no choice later down the road, but as a rule of thumb, if your resolutions start to shift, things will look very out of place. This problem still exists in higher definition games too, and it can be a matter of mixing vector styles with highly detailed styles, or otherwise combining visual elements that just don't match. Saturated cartoony art next to dark realistic art, bold outlines next to things with no outlines. Pixel art is just the simplest example. Sometimes of course it makes sense to be intentionally inconsistent, or consistently inconsistent. Maybe interactive entities are always outlined, for example. But this is what I mean, your art should have clear rules that are adhered to. It doesn't really matter what those rules are. So why does this matter? An inconsistent aesthetic kills the illusion of your visuals. When you look at a pixel art game, your brain fills in the details for the low resolution sprites. The illusion is that you are just looking through the world at a particular low resolution lens, but the world is still believable. You don't believe that the character is actually made up of sharp angular blocks, but if their resolution doesn't match the world, suddenly that's exactly what it looks like. The illusion is broken and you are looking at a game asset, no longer a character. Again, this is true beyond pixel art. When the consistency is broken, you can no longer believe that you are looking at a world through a particular lens, as you see very clearly these technical differences, and the assets appear as, well, game assets, sometimes looking like assets from different games entirely, but always ultimately looking poorly assembled. As I said before, there are exceptions to every rule, and a bad, messy aesthetic can be an intentional look. Again, though, I would call that a kind of consistent inconsistency. Usually, though, this is the result of a developer who is focused too much on the needs of each individual piece of art and is not thinking about how the whole of the game view fits and blends together. So what should you do? Well, there's a few things you can do. Mostly awareness of the issue and practice solves this issue on its own over time. You develop an eye for consistency. It's hard. I'm not amazing at it. I can tell when it's not there, but I'm not always good at finding the solution. The idea though is, as I said, to not over-focus on individual assets, but more on the whole scene and look of the game. However, there are some more obvious things you can do. For example, if you realize that your pixel art enemy needs to be bigger, you just have to draw it again, but bigger. You can't just scale it up or down without causing a visual issue. This can be a hard issue in games that want to have generic enemies of different sizes like roguelikes or whatever, where I'd really just recommend a more suitable art style, but this is the rule of thumb, don't stretch your art. Also, perhaps controversially, I think you should generally avoid asset packs. Or if you do use asset packs, you need to work very hard to select them with care and make sure you use the assets well in a way that fits together. This is a very real and difficult skill. Picking packs all from the same artist can help too, but basically you have to appreciate that while asset packs save you needing the skill of creating the art, you still have to assemble the art and still develop that eye for consistency. Lastly, don't be afraid to make your own art even if you quote-unquote can't draw. Badly drawn art with that eye for technical consistency, which is something that should be much easier for programmer, non-artsy types to comprehend, will look far better than a badly assembled asset pack or art all drawn in different styles. If you want a starting point, just set your brush size to a 2x2 black square, decide to only have black and white colors in your game, and just doodle every asset with that same brush. I guarantee just following some basic rules like this will give you a great, consistent aesthetic almost completely regardless of your drawing ability. In fact, being worse at drawing here can be better. A commonly used example here is Mike Bithel's Thomas Was Alone, a game that just, in big finger quotes, used rectangles, but looks amazing because of the eye for consistency, simplicity, and cleanness that made this style feel intentional and beautiful. This isn't easy, mind you. Mike is an experienced, capable developer who has built and trained this eye for consistency over time. And I could be wrong, but I recall him saying he consulted with other experts on things like his selection of colours for the game. That's how much detail you can go into on this stuff without any technical drawing ability being involved. The point is not that even a beginner can make a game look this great, because generally they can't. It's that most beginner developers are not thinking about the consistency of their visuals, and the moment you start to think about it, even a little bit, the look of your games will improve dramatically. Hope that helps, guys. I don't know how many or how often I will do these videos, but I've ranted about this enough on stream that I thought it deserved a video I could just reference instead. Like I said, there are exceptions to every rule. I'm sure there's plenty of ways you might disagree with what I've said, and that's all fine and okay. But I hope you found it interesting. I make videos about design and game development and tutorial videos for GameMaker, and I live stream development every Friday. Thank you to my patrons so much for funding what I do here. Become one of them if you want to see my videos early or get source code for my stuff and all those goodies. Join on YouTube for live stream benefits. Thank you ever so much for actually watching to the end as well. Most people don't do that, and it does help a lot, so thank you. Catch you all next time.